Already during our coverage of My Hero Academia's final war arc, we've described how UA finally found their traitor and how that led into the final battle with the villains, where Deku and the others pulled their brainpower together to form a plan that the villains couldn't possibly escape from. Over the course of this story, we've seen battles between America's #1 hero and Shigaraki, we've seen as Endeavor and Hawks battle against All For One of UA students by their side, we've also seen the battle between Endeavor's sons Shoto and Dabi unfold as the two clash in the center of Kamino Ward, where All Might's legendary statue stands half melted now. But after all of this, our story continues as Dabi looks down at Shoto having won their battle using his new quirk awakening, and the villain decides that there's no reason for him to die here battling his little brother. So he calls for Kurogiri to open a portal to him to go over to Endeavor's area, where things aren't going any better for the side of the heroes, given the fact that Endeavor's battlefield is entirely responsible for All For One and his army of High End Nomu that are all supported by villains. At the end of our last video, we described how narrowly Endeavor and the others were able to seemingly win against the Lord of Darkness, All For One himself, in a battle that cost Endeavor his arm and dangerously injured him to the point where he was starting to find it hard to move. However, this wasn't the end of All For One, who proceeds to tear a swath through the heroes on his path towards All Might and Deku, but that's a story for another time. Today we focus on the man cloaked by flames with a past hidden in the darkness, NG Todoroki, otherwise known as Japan's #1 hero, Endeavor, who despite how exhausted he is, before Endeavor stands to completely revive All For One with the prime body that he used to fight against All Might and an all-new ability to rewind through any danger that comes his way. The very moment that Endeavor falls to his knees thinking about how he has to do everything he just did all over again with even more difficulty now, a portal opens behind All For One, revealing Endeavor's son Toya Todoroki, who looks horribly burned as in his ruined mental state, the boy yells, "Hey there, Dad," as fire erupts out of Kurogiri's portal and other portals even still appear nearby, from which 1,000 Twice clones began to spill out onto the various battlefield as a result of events happening in Ochako and Toga's battlefield, but that as well is a story for another time. The moment that Hawks makes eye contact with the clones of Twice, he screams that they need to kill Twice now. However, it's almost as if Hawks' call falls on deaf ears as 3 major threats stand on the battlefield and no one knows which one to go after first. Not giving them time to think, Twice continues to multiply and multiply as he fills the battlefield with the sound of an opponent the heroes never thought they'd have to fight again. But lingering above it all, in the skies on top of this battlefield, we have Dabi, who reminds us how little he actually cares about Twice as his fire rampages from within his body and spews onto the horde of Twice clones, and Dabi tries to burn as many heroes as he can, as he figures that the Twice clones are good enough kindling to make sure the flames spread across the heroes, so why not? This looks like hell on earth for the heroes that live through it. However, to make things even more hectic, we see as Ochako Uraraka and her best friend Froppy narrowly exit through a Kurogiri portal onto the battlefield, promising to find some way to deal with the Twice clones created by Himiko Toga's quirk. And taking a little pressure off of the big shot heroes, we watch as Endeavor uses his remaining arm to easily battle through a wave of Twice clones as his son floats in front of him, causing Endeavor to worry about Shoto. "Toya, what happened to Shoto?" he asks, as Dabi tells Endeavor that he wanted to turn Shoto's corpse into a present for their father, but he was too strong, which makes sense because of all the work Endeavor put into his perfect little project. However, Dabi congratulates Endeavor on this by saying he managed to raise a hero strong enough to make sure that Dabi's dream can never be completely fulfilled. However, Shoto will be the only person that Endeavor loves and cherishes that'll survive this night, as Dabi still has a plan for taking out the entire Todoroki family, despite the fact that he shouldn't even be able to move right now. All For One takes the time to attack Hawks during this conversation between the Todoroki family. However, feeling confident with the promise of Twice being handled by someone else, Hawks tells Endeavor to take Toya elsewhere and stop him no matter what it takes, because he'll deal with All For One himself. All For One starts to laugh at Hawks as the hero continues on to tell Endeavor that no one here can handle Dabi's flames, and if this battlefield falls apart, it's all over for Deku's battlefield, since that's the first place All For One will go. All For One continues to laugh at Hawks, saying, "You're so cruel. Can't you see your friend just lost an arm? He's barely conscious, and still, you're telling him to cruelly handle his son while abandoning his duty of defeating me like a good #1 hero should." But being a bit of a smartass himself, Hawks replies saying, "Our #1 hero already beat you once today, so he deserves a new task while I take you down myself." Down on the ground, we see Endeavor standing as he stares Dabi down, who hasn't heard a single word that anyone else has said in his extreme focus on his father, as Dabi flies full force full speed towards Endeavor, who activates his flames for the last time, he hopes. As the Todoroki family works towards its ending, and Endeavor tells Dabi that from this moment on, he won't take his eyes off of him, that from now on until the very end, he'll watch over him until everything is over for the both of them. Now here's where we'll look away from Endeavor and Dabi for a moment as the two fly away from the Gunga Mountain battlefield for a while to the place of their final battle. But the story of the Todoroki family continues to spread itself like a fire or like ice across the surface of a frozen lake. First off, during this entire battle between the villains and the heroes, the team over at UA came up with an interesting solution for what to do with the civilians since nowhere would be safe for them. And this was to create a huge number of escape pods that acted as smaller individual shelters for everyone that didn't take part in this battle. Inside these pods, we see various characters that we've seen around town over the course of the series, but in one particular pod we see the pair of Tetsu as well as Kendo from Class 1B, who patrol their very own shelter cube as they begin their journey from UA's grounds in a long underground path that was dug straight between both schools. As Kendo walks around within her evacuation cube, suddenly it stops moving along the maglev rail system, which pushes everyone for a moment and causes quite a bit of confusion as everyone starts to wonder if they're stuck and if they traded one bad situation for another. At UA, we see Tsukauchi and his new assistant La Brava sending a message to the cube letting them know that somehow the transportation was stopped from the inside, causing the heroes to look around for anyone suspicious, and that's exactly what they find. Inside the pod, there's a man of a bowl-cut hairstyle who activates his quirk, sending electricity arcing between two of his fingers, and as this catches Kendo's attention, she calls out to Tetsu to apprehend their suspect. However, right at that moment, parts of the ceiling start to cave in around them, causing some retired heroes to leap into action, protecting their fellow civilians by catching the rubble. And as Death Arms looks down with tears in his eyes, saying that his body moved before he had a chance to think, proving that he still has the soul of a hero despite leaving everything behind at the end of My Hero Academia Season 6, he looks down right into the beautiful grayish blue eyes of Fuyumi Todoroki, who stands beside her brother Natsuo Todoroki and their mother, Rei Todoroki, all huddled together as they thank the hero for saving them. But everyone starts to worry that there might be more danger on the way, as back at UA, Tsukauchi starts to panic as La Brava realizes exactly what the cause of the lingering sense of danger is. La Brava realizes that their systems have been hacked, but she's already dealt with that. However, during that process, it's possible that Skeptic managed to share some pretty crucial information with Dabi, which was the path of the evacuation cubes that are going from UA to Shiketsu. The problem here is that in what seems to be a major oversight by UA, the path from UA to Shiketsu actually has a dangerous location right in the middle between both locations, and that would be the Gunga Mountain Villa, where Dabi is still leading Endeavor away to a specific location when we see the Todoroki family and everyone inside the cube rushing to get out since it continues to cave in. When the Todoroki family makes it outside, all they see is the color blue reflecting off of the forest roughly a few hundred meters away. Hard to miss during this dark night, as it seems like again, Dabi has taken every step to make sure he and his family would be reunited again. Trying to find some hope that they can maybe avert a crisis here and at least keep the family away from their horrible son, Tsukauchi grabs one of his aides and tells him to explain the situation of Dabi's body and why they're getting such weird heat readings off of him, but the aide begins to shake as he stares at the computer screen and even falls to the ground, screaming that while Dabi is leading Endeavor away, he's actually compressing thermal energy deep within his heart, and this energy has continued to build up and surge within Dabi's body to the point where they believe there's no safe way for the villain to disperse of this energy, since Dabi himself is barely clinging to life with a body that is already starting to fall apart. This leads the aide to theorize that what Dabi is actually doing here is turning himself into a massive thermal energized bomb that would not only be capable of literally turning Endeavor into a shadow on the ground, but in the ensuing high pressure explosion, everything within 5 kilometers or roughly 3 miles will instantly be flash burned within the blink of an eye and completely cremated. Tsukauchi's heart sinks into his stomach, and then it goes deeper and deeper, like a coin thrown into a bottomless well of darkness, as the sound of his heartbeat gets even further and further away from him, and everything begins to go quiet in the detective's mind. He is panicking as the road to the victory that the heroes have wanted so badly starts to disappear in front of him, and Tsukauchi's world begins to crash as he realizes that they've been outplayed and the Todoroki family is well within the range of Dabi's explosion, with no way of getting them and every other shelter pod out of the area, since at this point even the evacuation cubes that have managed to start moving are all within the range of Dabi's explosion. Even a victory here against Shigaraki and All for One would be at the expense of all of the lives in Japan that the heroes have been entrusted with. And feeling like he'd lost, Tsukauchi falls to the ground. But at that moment when everything has fallen silent, Tsukauchi hears it. He starts to feel it. It's coming from a weird place, specifically his back pocket on his butt, but the sound that Tsukauchi is hearing, the vibration that Tsukauchi is feeling, is hope.
A phone call is here! A phone call is here!
All the way back in Kamino Ward, in the center of All Might Plaza, we see as Todoroki struggles to stand up and his friend Ida catches him, telling him that he still hasn't recovered from his last activation of Phosphor technique, which if you recall is Shoto's quirk awakening. However, Shoto responds that he's fine because even though his battle of Dabi is over, he still needs to reach Midoriya because he can still fight. Ida says, listen, I know right now your mind is still racing of thoughts about Toya Todoroki. It makes sense. Your brother got away and you're thinking you haven't done enough. But Todoroki, no, Shoto, listen to me. You've done enough, and you've already done all you can do today. Tenya then tells Shoto that he can't understand how frustrated he is after facing his brother, but Shoto once told him to never forget who he wants to become, and starts to cry as he sees the look on Shoto's face filled with rage and regret, questioning why such a kind person has to go through such a hard path. But at that moment, when even these two are looking for hope, a call comes through on Ida's communicator device, and instantly it catches both of the boys' attention as the call is from All Might. All Might says, oh great, you're both safe. Good to hear, but sorry, I've got to be brief and give you even more to do. All Might proceeds to explain the situation revolving around Dabi and the evacuation course to Shoto and Ida, telling them that he needs the two of them to go to Gunga Mountain Villa as quick as they can to save everyone, and telling Ida that he knows his legs will be able to get him there because he's seen Ida in action himself all the way back during the first arc of My Hero, when Ida was the one to go and get all the UA teachers to come and save the students. All Might then turns his attention to Shoto, saying, don't worry about All for One, because a strong ally is on his way to take care of him. Just put your heart in everything you've learned into stopping Toya and reassuring everyone by becoming the ideal version of yourself in this moment, saying that if they have any chance of averting a major catastrophe from happening right now, they're gonna need Ida's engine and Shoto's half hot, half cold. And with that, All Might signs off to begin a battle of his own, but Shoto is still kinda skeptical considering the fact that Ida's engine stalled out way earlier in the battle. It's here where we see Ida shoving his mask onto Todoroki, which spreads over Shoto's body as it becomes more of Ida's armor meant to protect Shoto, as Ida rubs up his engine to maximum power and takes off from the ground of All Might Plaza into the sky, cutting through different buildings, telling Shoto that his power and his engines have always been for guiding lost children. As the pieces begin to move in place, this story of ice and fire finally raises the curtain on its final act, as a giant spear of highly pressurized thermal energy begins to form in the Gunga Mountain Forest about 800 meters away from the All for One battlefield, as Endeavor falls to the ground and his body starts to singe all over, just from being near the burning entity of rage that is Dabi. Over his communicator, which is barely working at this point, Endeavor gets the news that Dabi is going to explode and understands the range of the blast and what he has to do to stop it. But understand that both Shoto and Endeavor here are acting without the knowledge that the Todoroki family is actually inside one of those evacuation cubes that stopped within the range of Dabi's blast, since it was decided that informing the two of this fact would give them far too much pressure that they don't need given the already extremely high stakes. However, even without that knowledge, Endeavor realizes that Dabi's explosion would also mean the end for everyone still trying to take down Toga and twice his clones, meaning we'd also have to say goodbye to characters like Ochako, Froppy, Jiro, and even more. So Endeavor stands his ground and looks up as Dabi falls down towards him like a burning sun coming down from the sky with a beast at its heart. As Dabi screams, "Dad! Look at me," as he activates his quirk in one of his arms that swells up, no longer being able to contain Dabi's flames, as Dabi creates a massive fist made of fire that crashes down on Endeavor and covers his entire body in intense burn. Endeavor doesn't see Dabi right now though. Through the flames, he sees his small son Toya saying, "Look what I can do," when in reality, Dabi sacrificed his own arm and now looks more like his father than ever before. As Dabi rushes towards Endeavor and the giant flaming fist burns right through the ground and starts to boil the earth itself, large eruptions of molten magma fly out at random, burning Endeavor even more as he lands right in Dabi's path, yelling, "Put out your flames, Toya! Please! Enough! I don't want you to die." Dabi opens his mouth as wide as possible as the sides of his mouth burn away and break, allowing it to crack and stretch even further as it looks like the blue flames of hell are dancing within the areas of his mouth, and from those flames come the words, "Natsukan, look." Endeavor realizes that, probably due to the sheer amount of pain that Dabi is in, along with the madness from finally having his twisted goal within reach, the boy is no longer truly there, as he's lost himself in his madness. But Endeavor isn't far behind, as he thinks that he's barely able to stay conscious right now due to the heat, which is even starting to burn him through his flame resistance. Endeavor is losing consciousness, as Dabi stands on Endeavor's legs, continuing to burn everything around them in a massive dome of fire. But in the heart of the storm, it's a heart that Endeavor starts to look for, as he looks at his son's chest and starts to push aside the flames from Dabi's quirk awakening that leave an X on his body that marks the spot of another shocking realization for Endeavor that happens in this moment when he moves the flames aside and sees something he never expected to see, which was ice that isn't being melted by his flames, that he put there using his very own ice quirk. In Endeavor's mind, he remembers all of the explanations he's ever heard of someone's quirk awakening in a crucial moment, of how in a near-death experience, a person's quirk can even grow sometimes to take on new properties which are sometimes based on their lineage, and how right now in front of him, the proof that none of this ever needed to happen is right there. Proof that Dabi was truly perfect all along, and all of the pain that the Todoroki family endured over the years could have been avoided. Now, cutting away again, we have the Todoroki family, who once again was just barely able to escape from their evacuation cube into the bright blue forest of the Gunga Mountain Villa. It's here where, instantly realizing whose flames those are, we see Rei Todoroki grabbing hold of one of the helper robots that are helping the civilians get free and catching a ride right into the flaming forest, as Fuyumi and Natsuo do the same behind their mom, chasing her towards the center of Dabi's thermo energy bubble. Back at Endeavor's location, he starts to black out as he sees Toya as he looked the last time that he saw him, with his white hair and without any new burns, as it looks like the two are dancing with both of their missing arms being replaced by flames. And Endeavor tells Toya that all of this is his responsibility, and that he thought that he had to stay alive to make amends for what he did to his whole family. But this entire time, he didn't realize that Toya has been watching him and only growing angrier and angrier, and says that for that, he owes Toya amends more than anybody else. And to fulfill that, at the very least, he won't let his son die alone. But he can't let him drag everyone else into this either. So Enji's heart, no, his soul itself, begins to burn as he grabs Dabi with all of his strength and starts to rocket up towards the sky. But just as they get off the ground, Dabi's explosion begins its final stage. There's not enough time. At this point, I'm sure Endeavor had to have thought that he was hallucinating, that maybe because of the burns, his nerves were acting and making him feel sensations that weren't there. Because in the middle of all of this chaos and him and Dabi's flames burning together into a massive blast of unholy power, he feels cold. He actually feels a chill blow across his face as he opens his eyes and sees ice, actual ice, melting and reforming and melting and reforming like a blanket over him and his son, as he turns and looks into the eyes of his wife, Rei Todoroki, whose eyes begin to steam as the skin on her face and hands begin to burn off as well. And Rei uses her quirk to delay the explosion as much as she can, trying with the little hope that she has left to freeze Toya and finally put out the fire, as the robot that she rode to get here lifts up its thumb, having completed its task, and Endeavor hears his wife screaming Toya's name as he himself questions just what she's doing here, since even with her ice quirk she'll still burn to death before she's able to keep Toya from going off. However, Rei doesn't care, saying the same goes for him and Toya, right? So how could she ever leave him? Toya, hearing his mother's voice, says, "Mom," as Rei apologizes to her son as he calls out to Fuyumi and Natsuo, who just now arrived at this instant. Rei screams to her children to stay away, but Fuyumi tells her mom to never leave their side again, telling Toya to please stop. Please not take them away, since she doesn't want to lose anyone else. And as Natsuo even chimes in yelling at Toya to stop causing trouble, the entire family uses their ice quirks all together on Toya to try and cool him down. But still, nothing. Endeavor musters all of his firepower, realizing that this isn't going to work, but still deciding that he wants to be the only one that Toya kills here. However, he can't move. It's just too much. It's just too much. At that exact moment, an orb of light forms around Dabi as rays stretch across the entire horizon, stretching from it, as Dabi's flames begin to change from their blue color to a pristine, colorless white, as we see him looking at his entire family and thinking about how they're finally all looking at him. And for a second, in Dabi's mind, he sees himself with no burns, standing with his family happily in a future that never happened. And with that, Dabi's explosion begins as he thinks If only it was that simple. Across the battlefield, we see heroes, civilians, and even Twice clones reacting to the giant rays of light coming from the expanding dome of fire stemming from Dabi's body, as everyone either starts to run, continues battling, or even just gives up in these last moments. Dabi's explosion is a sure thing, unstoppable by anyone. But off in the Philippines, we see as a woman standing at a cafe watching the stream of everything that's happening, clutches her hands together and begins to pray for a miracle, as everything goes quiet one more time, and through the streets of a small Japanese neighborhood, for a split second, we see a flash of smoke that is followed a few seconds later by a massive boom. As all of the falling rain in the area is frozen in an instant, and we see Tenya Ida moving at supersonic speed with a jet made of ice created around him to make him even more aerodynamic thanks to Shoto's quirk, as Shoto finally lets loose all of the phosphor energy that he's been storing so far, tearing Ida's costume that he was wearing to shreds as the pieces scatter in the wind like petals from his mother's favorite flower, and Shoto leaps off of Ida's back to continue running when his friend can't run anymore. But Tenya tells Shoto that right now is the time for him to go and become the person that he always wanted to be, since Ida was only able to do that because of Todoroki. One foot moves in front of the other as Todoroki closes his eyes and runs as fast as he can towards his family. And it's here where Todoroki thinks of the letter that he first wrote to his mom at the beginning of the series. The letter reads, "Dear Mother, I'll try to keep this brief. I'm doing everything I can to reach my classmates' level, which includes having conversations with them every day. Sometimes our conversations lead to arguments, but sometimes arguments help us understand each other's feelings. Sometimes my friends get angry and they cry, not just for themselves though, but for the sake of others. I think I want to be like that too. It's difficult, but I'll do my best. There's still so much I want to say, but I'll be seeing you soon and hopefully we can talk about all of that and more. I love you, I miss you, your son, Shoto." As the letter comes to an end, we see Shoto finally reaching the site of his family's final battle as his eyes wide out and he lets loose his final attack at the same moment that Dabi's explosion finally goes off, as everything goes white. From far away, a news crew captures a massive explosion that looks like it's only beginning to spread. But in the heart of it, Shoto's Great Glacial Aegir technique activates, popping the explosion itself like a bubble as Shoto completely stops the power of Dabi's combustion using the power of his Phosphor Quirk Awakening, which can dampen all sources of heat. And as the smoke clears and we see everyone reacting to the fact that they all actually get to live another day, we see Todoroki just now realizing that his entire family was there, as he says it's a good thing that they were, because even with his final technique, he doesn't think it had quite enough power to put a stop to Toya, so it truly was only with all of their efforts combined that they managed to reach this point. Shoto stands there with no energy left as his hand freezes over and the rest of his family sits there in shock, looking at their younger brother being glad that it's over. But that's the problem. It really isn't. As Dabi lays there burned to a crisp, with it not even looking like he has eyes anymore, Dabi says, "Die, perish. We should all die." But as Dabi continues to speak, he feels all the warmth in his body leaving him as it gets converted into cold because Shoto's technique needs to completely disable his brother for the moment here as it begins to freeze Dabi from the inside out. Dabi is barely able to get out "I hate you, Dad, and our family too" as he begins to pass out. But Endeavor says, "Yeah, tell me everything you want to say. I want to hear it all." As he looks towards the rest of his family, apologizing to Rei for pushing her past her limit. Apologizing to Fuyumi for always putting everything on her shoulders. Apologizing to Natsuo for always neglecting him. And apologizing to Shoto for everything. As the Todorokis one by one lay down in the snow over the burned forest of the Gunga Mountain Villa, the curtain closes on their story once and for all. In the end, the Todorokis were able to save Toya, also known as the villain Dabi, whose official code name was Blue Flame. Despite saving his brother and everyone else in the area, My Hero Academia has shown us that the work isn't done yet just because you were able to physically save someone. And like Eri, Dabi has a long path in front of him if he's ever meant to truly be saved. A path made much longer by the fact that Dabi doesn't seem willing to go down it, as despite everything, he still hates his family and wants nothing to do with them. However, the complicated story of his rehabilitation and the final scenes of the Todoroki family we see in the story of My Hero Academia are a story for another time. So thank you for joining us as we reach the end of another villain story in MHA, and I hope you join us next time to tell the story of two girls unable to understand each other in a cruel world between heroes and villains, as Himiko Toga's battle against Ochako takes center stage.